How do you find credible angel investors, venture capitalists for startup business or business expansion?
How do you find them?
How do you find them?
Credible angels or venture investors.
Well, I mean, look, I would just say there's a number of ways. I mean, you ask people, there's plenty of resources, public resources. There's books written on this subject. There's stuff all over the internet. I mean, cold calling is hard. It probably isn't going to work. They get thousands and thousands and thousands of business plans. You need, as a general rule, it helps to have somebody make an entree. I mean, I'm not saying that's the only way, but,
Yeah, I think Joe's right. I mean, you need an introduction, and you may not have a direct introduction yourself, but you need to find a friend or a friend of a friend that actually can make an introduction, because ultimately that is how, in my case, Kleiner Perkins became available to me by luck in some ways, because my former boss became a partner there. So he had been my boss at Intel, so that was my entree there. So I knew I was going to get a meeting there, at least with him. By the way, he only gave me 1 hour in the red carpet lounge before a flight in San Francisco airport. And we did such a good job in that 1 hour, apparently, that he then took the business plan and read it over the 4-hour or 5-hour flight. And by the time he got to Boston, he had decided that he wanted to invest and would become a sponsor for us. And we then had our sponsor. Now, that didn't mean we didn't have work to do, but we had somebody running around inside of Kleiner Perkins trying to sign up everyone else along the way. You need introductions. Carrie, for example, in my young lady in Kapli, was introduced to me by a set of friends in Lake Geneva outside of Chicago. And he just one day said, I was going swimming, in fact. He said, you're not going swimming, you're going to meet this young lady, she's here. I just want a half an hour of your time, then you can run down and go swimming. So, I did it because I have a lot of respect for the guy. And then I kind of liked Kerry, and one thing went to another. But yeah, it's introductions.
I told the story about Evans and Sutherland Computer Corporation. We went in there and they wanted us to build a product for them. But the introduction came because Sutherland, who was one of the founders, was a computer science professor at Caltech and also worked at Xerox PARC in Palo Alto. And he knew about this design methodology because it came out of a fellow named Carver Mead and Lynn Conway out of Caltech. And when we went in and made him a pitch about our design tools, he was somewhat familiar, and then he got Dave Evans involved, and Dave was the CEO, and Dave happened to be on the board of Hamburg and Quist. So when they got interested that way, Dave's the one that introduced us to Hamburg and Quist. So it was sort of a three-step process to get there, but it was an introductory thing, and Evans and Sutherland was willing to recommend that Hamburg and Quist invest in us, which made a big difference.
So I have my own little personal note on this, by the way. Networking is not, we didn't invent networking. Networking has been going on for a long time, but networking has changed, right? Social networking today, especially for people ages 18 to 35, is through the social networking tools that are afforded, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the what have you. The networking that I do and he does, that's a very old school networking. It's the face-to-face kind. And I have my own personal beliefs of which one's the better of the two. I believe the face-to-face kind is the kind that we're talking about that we leverage. That Jim Williams that I meet at a party, that I follow up with other meetings. We like each other. He introduces me to 5 other people who introduced me to 5 other people, and it keeps going on. How do you do that through Facebook? How do you do that through email or whatever? So for any of you that are in the category of the younger, start doing the old school networking, the old boy networking, because that's how it works. And I don't think you can substitute an email message or a text message for that. And I fly out to Chicago, and I fly all over the place to have other face-to-face meetings.
A lot of your questions, I think you'd find a lot of great answers in Rob's book, Smart Ups. I can't recommend that highly enough. And his website, entrepreneur-america.com has got a whole lot of good stuff on it, so take a look at that. Now, these 4 questions are getting more towards how do we build the next generation of entrepreneurs. This is great. What was the most important or most valuable class that each of you took in college?
Well, for me, that's easy. For me, and I was an accounting major, and accounting was the basis from which I launched my career. And so I ended up getting out of college. I did not go to graduate school. I became a CPA and all that stuff. But, you know, if it wasn't for accounting as a skill set, you know, that was my ticket into the business world. Now, I had to figure out how to capitalize on that, which I did, you know, but accounting for me.
Math and science. Just, you know, at Cornell, I just double majored. That's all I did is math and science. They didn't make me take anything else. So I had math and physics and chemistry and all of the sciences, because it basically, I thought, well, you're reading, you know, in English and history and all that. I can do that later when I make some money. I'll sit down and read a whole bunch of books, which I did. I have a huge library now, and I'm an avid reader. But I wanted to get some of the hardcore sciences because I wanted it to shape the way I think and to shape my brain. And I believe it did. I believe I would do exactly the same thing over.
Made him a great salesman.
I have a little different take on this. My sophomore, junior, and senior year, I was working full-time and going to school full-time, and I was in the semiconductor business, and all the classes that I took did not relate to what was happening in the real world, so I got totally disillusioned by it. But I could have been a math major. I ended up a physics major, but I had more math than physics. But I think the thought process you obtain by doing math is well worth it because you think a different way, and it really helped me. But the things I learned about business were learned the hard way in the business environment, not in school at all. And a lot of the people we hired in the technology businesses were people like English majors or school teachers. Just the fact that they had a degree and could think made a big difference. And so I think getting a degree is super important, but I'm not sure how important it is to get into a certain discipline unless you're really going to be an engineer all your life or a marketing person, something like that. But you never know where your career path is going to take you, so you just have to be flexible. But I do think you need a degree. So I would recommend everybody stay in school and don't drop out for any reason whatsoever.
And this will be a good one. What was your most valuable experience in leading you to where you are now?
I think the most valuable experience for me was back in the early 70s. I met a couple of fellows that wanted to start a semiconductor company. And I had a couple of fellows that I was associated with that we'd make a good team to join the company. But we're all a little bit leery about doing it because of the risk involved. We're leaving very good paying jobs to go take a risk and join a startup. But after I made the decision to go ahead and take the risk, it really was apparent that there wasn't any risk at all. If you take a risk to start a company or get involved in a startup, you become more valuable just because of the experiences you get doing that. I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's triangle, where the top of it is self-actualization. When you start a company, you start at the top. And what happens as it grows, you sink down through this triangle until you get down to the point of security or wherever. But the bureaucracy takes over, and you lose your perspective. All of a sudden, when you're in a startup initially, any decision you make can kill the company or make it super successful. So you're out there on your own with the company in your hands. If you stay around for a few years and get into bureaucracy, you got rules now. You can't spend more than $50,000 without passing it up 3 levels of management. It's just crazy, because why would they trust you in the beginning and not toward the end? And so the key of starting a company is making sure everybody stays self-actualized as long as you can without putting in the bureaucracy. But the fact that we made a decision to take the risk Then finding out later that it really wasn't a risk was the most important thing for me.